Basically, for the industry ecosystem maps, we're basically trying to answer 3 questions. What's an ecosystem? What's an industry? And why do maps matter? When you think about an ecosystem, what do you think about?
Collection of components.
Collection of components. The system side of ecosystem. What else? Interactions. How does that system affect each other? Right? How do different parts of the system affect each other? What else?
Inputs and outputs.
Inputs and outputs.
These different components of the ecosystem rely on each other, and if one fails or is removed, then the whole thing collapses.
The interreliance of the different components of an ecosystem, and the fact that if something gets out of whack, the whole thing can fail. Great. These are all, yeah.
Just a cohesive whole of everything around one type of...
Cohesive whole. The idea that it actually is a system of sorts with interacting pieces that have common.
Feedbacks.
Feedback. Yep. This is all great. That's exactly what we're talking about here. I went out to Wikipedia to get a simple definition, right? It's a community. And what I like about that definition is it's a community. It's that idea of it's a set of interacting participants, if you will, that's interacting as a system, so it has something defined as the whole. And for the Wikipedia definition, it talks about the biotic and abiotic components that are linked through nutrient cycles and energy flows. So there's that idea of interactions, that idea of feedback, that idea of common success, common failure, all involved in that definition. When I think about an industry ecosystem, a lot of that works for me. It's a community, meaning that the industry is still people. We think about it as companies, but at the end of it, it's a bunch of actors that are acting together as a community. That's interacting as a system, meaning it has some defined boundaries, if you will. The nutrient cycles and energy flows, I think about it as materials, money, and information, as those things that flow between the actors in the ecosystem and that provide the feedback loops, provide the success and failure parameters, et cetera. So when I think about an industry ecosystem, that's what I think about. And the industry ecosystem is really just a mapping tool, if you will, to help support the BMC work. I mean, basically, it's the map that describes the mess in the middle of what you're learning about the various aspects of a business scalable in an industry. So it's not unrelated to the business model canvas. It's kind of a cheat sheet for recording some of your data. So you can go back and forth between that record of data and the implications for the specifics of your customer segment, your value proposition, your channel, your partners, your cost structure, your revenue potential. Okay? So it's nothing magic. There is no right answer. It's another tool to use as you collect data and look for insight from that data. What's an industry? What's an industry?
It's a chain.
It's a chain?
Chain of buy and sell.
A chain of buy and sell, okay. How would you describe an industry?
Tool making.
Tool making is an industry. Okay, why is tool making an industry?
Well, I mean, in the basic sense of humans, and some other animals are tool makers, but primarily humans, right? That's how we succeed as a species.
Okay, so industry is a thing that humans have made up. Kind of, yeah? Okay.
I'd argue that
A collection of solutions provided by a group of persons.
A collection of solutions. So we've got some vague ideas of what an industry is. It's interesting that that's harder for this group than an ecosystem was. There are more folks in this room that have a really clear understanding of what an ecosystem is, but when you're asked to give a good definition of what is an industry, it's like, well, I know buying and selling is involved. I know that stuff goes up and down the chain. I know that it's a human aspect of interaction. The simplest definition that I've ever found is an industry is how economic activity is organized. So it does kind of relate to the economic transactions of a community of interest, if you will. Trade associations, shows, publications are good indicators of where we've decided to draw the boundaries of an industry. Because we make industries up, right? We make up what's in an industry. Just like an ecosystem, you have to make up the boundaries of an ecosystem. Because an ecosystem can be in a cell or it could be the planet. They're both ecosystems. So you're defining those boundaries, if you will. And for a lot of folks, the easiest way to find the boundaries is because other people have already defined them. They might have defined them as through the trade associations. What are some examples of industries that we already know about? What industry are you guys in?
Education.
Education? Agriculture? Aerospace? Right, so there's great examples out there. Transportation is often talked about as an industry. But then also, automotive, aerospace, construction are defined as industries. So transportation at one level, aerospace at another level. They're both transportation. So industries can be defined and redefined at whatever level makes sense. Medical, but is it pharma or is it devices? Or is it service providers? Entertainment, movies or gaming, or sports. So recognize that industry definition is a choice, at what level you want to draw the boundaries for you. So ecosystem maps are really just tools to help you understand your industry, where you're literally taking the idea of an ecosystem, deciding where those system boundaries are that's relevant for your particular business idea, the industry that matters to you. And where you are right now in your customer discovery is you may not know this stuff yet. You don't know what the bounds of your industry are. You don't know which aspects of the industry you need to go deeper. Is it transportation or is it automotive? Is it advanced mobility in automotive? Or is it software solutions to advanced mobility in automotive? Right? Those are all industry definitions at different levels of detail. So what we're going to be exploring today is how do you begin to think about that, and we're actually going to ask you to throw stuff up against the wall, different colored Post-it notes up against your flip charts, to begin to map out your best guess of what your ecosystem is right now. So, an ecosystem map is just that picture of the community of interest interacting with specific focus on the flow of money, material, and information. Okay? What are some of the ecosystem challenges? Well, who's the community? How far flung do I define my community? So who do I include? We start with customers, of course, but who else might we include in our ecosystem map? Who else is involved in our community of interest? Regulators. Suppliers. Competitors. Investors and funders might be in that community, depending on what industry it is. If it's energy project development, investors and funders play a huge part in new sales. Influencers and thought leaders. If it's a new battery testing technology, the folks that define what battery technologies are going to be acceptable, those thought leaders, are an important part to understand. So that's all the community kinds of questions. What about the system boundaries? How might you think about where the edges of your ecosystem might be? How do you define those? End user would be one of the part of the community. But basically what we're trying to ask you guys to do is think about the industry definition as the ecosystem boundaries for you. There also is going to be a geographical question for you. Are your boundaries regional or global? And you may need to go back and forth between the two at first. And there might be a time frame boundary condition that you need to think about. Are you just looking at the ecosystem today, or do you need to think about the ecosystem 7 years from now or 10 years from now, what it might be? So folks like the robotics muscles. It's very cool stuff for lifelike robotics today, but how big of a market is lifelike robotics? Well, where will those go in the next 10 years? Safe autonomy. Your competitors today and your competitors 10 years from now. So that time frame boundary may be an important one to think about. And interviewing folks that are already thinking about the future of that industry on a full-time basis will help you understand your ecosystem better. Not just mapping the ecosystem today, but working with the thought leaders, the product developers, the innovation team leaders, those advanced scouts, if you will, on the future of their industry and getting their perspective folded into your understanding of your ecosystem map. So at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is literally map the flow of materials, money, and information. After defining the edges of your system, the industry you're playing in, and the geography and time frame you're trying to understand, and the players in that industry that you think matter the most. And this is an iterative process. You're going to throw spaghetti against the wall. You're going to go out and do customer discovery. You're going to find out this piece of the map is all wrong. It's at the wrong level of detail. I need to go 2 levels deeper. And this piece of the map doesn't matter to me right now. And here's why. Another reminder, when we talk about that community of customers, that there's all different flavors, if you will, or different roles of customers, and understanding each of those may be a real important insight that you can get off of your ecosystem map. Here's some examples. I mean, literally, there is stuff out there already. If you Google your industry, ecosystem, and hit image, you'll end up with dozens of pictures of what other people think that industry ecosystem already looks like. So start there. You don't have to use them whole, but they can begin to inform your thinking. So here's a map of software as a service, because I know there's a couple of you that are wrestling with, is our actual business software as a service? What do we notice about this map?
There's some wiggly boundaries.
Wiggly boundaries, okay. Yeah, what else?
Market niches that you can have
Market niches.
blank spaces.
Some blank spaces. It's kind of messy. There's lots of companies.
The no specific
Most of them are
industries.
no specific industry.
Yeah.
So like most of the players are quote, no specific industry.
Yep. So yeah, what I found interesting about the map is they've got one dimension that's about the target industry and one dimension that's about the target sort of business unit or user group. And what's interesting, so they're trying to map their software as a service offering in the context of what industry and who, what role in that industry. And what one of the conclusions is most of the software as a service type applications are actually generic. They're not industry specific, according to this particular publisher, if you will. So, these were the things that I noticed. Customer industries on the vertical, functions and value-added steps on the horizontal, lots of players, lots of companies. Here's one for drug innovation ecosystem in Singapore. So Artemis, drug innovation ecosystem. What do we notice about this one? Oops, I just gave you the answer, sorry. What do we notice about this one? Yeah, so they talk about the different phases of drug commercialization, from discovery to translation to commercialization. They talk about different areas of therapeutic focus. They talk about the therapeutic development review. So they have several different dimensions going on at once in terms of how the flow of information and money work. Pretty limited number of specific players on this map. Don't know if it's because there just are that few, or it's just that this publisher only knew about a few. But again, they put a lot of information about how they think this ecosystem works in their map. Robotics ecosystem. What do we notice? It's messy. The thing that jumped off the page of me is that it includes things like banks, laws, and standards groups. I would not have thought about banks as an important stakeholder in my robotics ecosystem, but maybe they are. So again, my point here is not to say these are the answers, but to say these are versions of answers that were useful to somebody, and that there's plenty of this stuff already out there, so doing a little bit of wading around and finding pieces of things you like may be worthwhile. The biggest thing about the ecosystem map is it's both a repository for what you're learning in your customer discovery interview, a way to record your information, and a way to inform your customer discovery. Where are there blank spaces on the page that I don't know enough about? Because I've never talked to the banks about their role in robotics funding. Or I've never talked to the legal standards group about how much time and money it takes to get a certified product into this industry. So it illuminates some of those gaps in our understanding of our ecosystem by trying to draw the map. So maps really help you navigate the basic questions of, do I have the information I need? Have I talked to the stakeholders that matter? Am I missing big pieces of the map? Do I understand the interactions, that flow of information, money, and materials? Do I understand how it's going to have to change for me to fit in here? When I introduce myself into this flow, who cares? Who is disrupted? Who has something to lose when I come in? Who has something to gain when I come in? If I could enter in a slightly different way so I can make winners out of both of them instead of a loser out of one and a winner out of the other, is that a better business model for me? Right? So, and then that basic question, do the players in the ecosystem have the willingness to change? The battery testing folks, you guys. We know it's not good enough, but it is the standard that the industry uses. All the product specs call for it. We're not changing anytime soon. Come back in 7 years. Wait, I'll be retired by then. See ya, right? And then again, the key challenges around getting the ecosystem map at the level you need is that who's the community of interest, the stakeholders, where are my boundaries, and what level of detail do I need to be working at to get the insights I need. Other examples, here's the electricity example. Starts with generation at the upper right, flows through high voltage transmission, through distribution to use on customer sites. One version of ecosystem map. You can take just the distribution and blow it up as its own ecosystem. You can take just distributed energy sources and blow it up as its ecosystem. So you can see how it's about this fractal kind of problem. The big picture, the focus on the area that matters the most to me at that next level of detail, to the next level of detail, to the next level of detail, till I understand where I fit, who and how I fit in ways where I have something to gain and my customers have something to gain. We talk about 3 levels of ecosystem map tools. For the most part, most of us aren't going to get past value chain. But there is something called workflow, which is that next level of detail, which is the specifics of how somebody does their job. And then there's the real specifics of the purchasing process. How does the product get bought today? At some point, you're going to need to know both of those, but we're not going there. It's increasing specificity down those 3 levels of maps. But they're all built on the same kind of concept, the flow of money, materials, and information among a community of interest. Value chain. It's the chain of steps a product takes from fire and earth to the end user. And I use this definition because it is very big and very broad. For value chain, how far up in the value chain do I need to go before I'm confident I understand the value chain? If you go all the way back to the raw material of fire and earth, you're there. Now, it's a kind of a big definition. It's kind of a corny definition, but it does kind of force the question of, have I gone far enough upstream to really understand that my value chain is complete? And then, of course, all the way out to the end user. Because at the end of the day, the end user pays for everybody in the chain. All the revenue starts with that end user's purchase price. And it has to feed everybody through the chain. And I keep talking about it as if it's a single chain, but most value chains aren't. Most value chains are more of a web. So value chain maps help answer those basic questions about how money, material, and data flow. Typical value chain maps kind of start with the manufacturing, sales, service, maintenance, those kinds of functions. Another example talks about it as upstream activities and downstream activities, starting with raw materials, going all the way through wholesale, retail, distribution chains to a customer. Here's Michael Porter's version of value chain, where the bottom primary value activities are those steps to get a product to market. The upper value-added steps are more the support functions to support the firm. The key value chain questions are really about, where does my technology fit? What's the value prop for everybody in the value chain? Is it a regional, global chain that I need to understand? And how does that flow of material and money and information change by region or on a global basis? Workflow, we've already talked about it a little bit when we talked about the value prop. Understanding the specific job your customer has at the level of workflow can be very enlightening. We're not going to go very far into it. Purchasing process we've already talked about. Here's an example. And we have time for this. Here's an example of a value chain piece of work that one of the teams did years and years ago. They had an omniphobic coating for solar PV. The idea was that it was going to shed water and stay cleaner, so end up with higher productivity through the life of the solar cell. They did their, they had a hypothesis that their technology was going to fit in the manufacturing sector. They did their work and they laid out the value chain. They went all the way back to earth and fire, silicone, earth, through processing, silicon manufacturing, cell manufacturing, blah, 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 all the way through to project development, utility as the owner. And they figured that they were there in the module manufacturing. So they started doing their customer discovery around that manufacturing segment. And they asked, so tell us how modules are made. And one of the things they discovered is the modules come in already coated. So the idea of them selling their coating to the manufacturer, oops, not going to happen that way. So they realized they had to go out of what they thought their original value chain was and understand that supply chain for the modules differently. And they ended up going in and understanding that supply chain and understanding that their actual highest value add was licensing their technology to the company that produced the machines that put the coating on the glass. Because there were only a couple dozen machines built on the planet to do this. Even though there were millions of modules ultimately produced, there were a couple dozen machines that did the coating onto the glass. So if they could license into the market leader for those machines, they could corner the market in getting their omniphobic coating out on pretty much every module out there. Who would have thought that, right? But it wasn't until they went into the details of the value chain map that they could get to those very specific details of who buys what, flow of materials and money, and therefore where does their technology fit. Okay, we're going to go right into a workshop. You guys are going to spend some time on defining your industry, developing a draft value chain. So the stakeholders in the industry and your first guess at how do materials, money, and information flow among those different stakeholders. Feel free to do a little Googling to find out what versions of value chains already exist out there. But downloading one of those and saying it's yours, not going to be good enough. We really, literally want you to be working at your flip charts, using your Post-it notes for where you're, for your various stakeholders, sticking your Post-it notes up. And the reason why we suggest Post-it notes is because oftentimes you get the initial relationships not quite right. So it's much easier to just move the stakeholder to where they really belong than to redraw your whole chain. So if you generate your stakeholders first and then start mapping them, then you can start to play with how do we think this industry works. Yeah?
So do you want people to Google now or go onto their flip charts and start?
I would say go ahead and go on your flip charts. The first work is defining your industry. So figuring out what industry do you think you're in. Identifying the stakeholders, the community of that industry. So the boundary is the industry, the community is the stakeholders. And then start to literally place your stakeholders on a map and your best understanding of how money, material, and information flow among those stakeholders. And then if you can figure out where you belong on that map, that'd be awesome.